I'm actually going to bring up some of the Friday stuff, Winthrop and Columbus a little bit, just because it's really important stuff. But just wanted to tell everybody, welcome to the class. Like I said, like I told you guys in my intro video, this class is my specialty. This is what I went to graduate school to do, is learn American Lit. So I'm a specialist in this field. So of all the classes I teach at Southern, this is probably the one that I'm best at doing, I would like to think. So well, we're getting started today. This is a summer class. As you guys know, the pace is pretty quick. Normally, we would if this was a normal semester class, we'd probably meet on like Tuesday, Thursdays or something. We could break up the readings a little bit more than we do. So probably the amount of reading we've done so far is equivalent to about 2 weeks of a normal year, probably. So we've gotten quite an intro here to the colonial period of American Lit. It's hard to even call. So with this class, we kind of even have to ask some big questions, like what even is literature, right? What even is literature? That's a question that we can kind of get started with today. Because you guys are probably been reading through some of this stuff. You're probably thinking this isn't literature, right? Like when we used to doing in high school, or something like that. This isn't a poem, right? This isn't a short story. So, like, what even is literature? I'll throw the question to you guys. How would some of you guys define literature? When you think of the word literature, what do you think of?
I think of like analyzing text, right, like getting to the root of, trying to get to the bottom of what people are trying to, get their point across. Or sometimes it's what they say is open to interpretation, just trying to figure out what they're talking about.
Right. So to build on that, Danny, how would you define a text?
Text, I guess, a way that a person would describe anything. I guess the way that they put something into, not words, but on paper, I guess.
Right. So anything written, right? So that's
right. Would you consider like movies, or would you consider like a movie literature?
Yeah, I teach. As some of you guys might know, I also teach the movie appreciation class, and I definitely classify films as texts. Right. So that's even my approach to that course, is teaching movies in the same way you teach literature. So good. So anything written down, right? That seems to be so. So if it's if a text, go ahead, Bridget.
It's like deep feelings. To be in. It's like something deep and passionate.
Right. So something stirring the emotions, right? Not just So not just something like, let's say a court document from 1740, right? Something like that probably isn't literature, right? Because it doesn't stir the emotions.
It's like somebody leaving a fingerprint on something, like a point in history or time or what they were going through. It's like in their own unique way, I guess.
Right. Yeah, like a fingerprint, right? That's not even like we wouldn't think of that as literature, right? It's just an objective thing.
Yeah.
All right, what do some of the rest of you guys think? How would some?
I had we called it classics, and this was back in 1996. So it was 1,000 years ago. But we read things like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we read Jane Eyre and stuff like that. But I always think of literature along those lines of like, I don't know if you've ever watched Friends, but like when Phoebe's taking the class and she's talking about like the Moors, or like it symbolizes of his character and things like that. That's what I think of when I think of literature.
Right. So the classics, right? Something like Frankenstein or Jane Eyre, as you said. That even brings up questions, right? What you just said, Lisa. Like how do we even come to determinations about what is a classic?
Right. Because I think a lot of Stephen King can be considered literature.
Right. Well, some people would argue no. Right.
I know, because it's horror genre, but you know.
Yeah, I love Stephen King myself. So, so where do we draw the line? Like what kind of judgments do we make to even classify something as literature, like Frankenstein or Jane Eyre? Any of you guys have any thoughts on this? How do we even come up with those determinations?
I don't think we really can. I mean, because every author has his or her own way of describing what they're trying to say in their novel or poems or texts or whatever. So I don't think there really is a line, personally.
Right. So you're taking us into some very gray territory here, Sydney.
What about when they compare them to, like, say, biblical or gods? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of literature will have the mention of, like the ones that we just possibly was reading parts of. Kind of like comparing it to, like, I don't know. I just want to say like gods or some type of goddess or something. The
like
Greek
biblical readings. Like, are you talking about like stuff that can be argued?
Right.
I don't know. I really think that there really is no line. I think that there's different categories of like texts and what authors are trying to say, but I think in general, I don't think there really is a line.
Right. So throwing an egregious one at you, would you guys classify Twilight as literature? Right. They're throwing a big curveball here.
Say Twilight.
Yeah. With Twilight.
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I would say no on that one.
But it's got a lot of that where and like forces.
I don't know. Yeah, it can be analyzed, and I'm sure there's symbology in there. And,
Well, when you think of it, kind of what we're along the lines of talking about is it's anything that kind of stands the test of time. And I mean, it's been around for a hot minute. And if you want to go that far, Harry Potter is classic literature. I've never read
or watched that, so I don't know anything about Harry Potter.
I've played the video game because I like to play Lego video games, and that's all I know of the plot.
Well, Regina, don't feel bad because I haven't never read or watched anything of it.
It's like even too, I've never really watched it, but they said it was good, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
Chronicles of
No,
Narnia.
I've never watched that either.
Yeah, is that what it's called? The Chronicles of
Narnia.
Okay, yeah. I've not watched that either, but I've also heard so much about it.
Okay, now I have. Okay, when you said that the Chronicles of Narnia, I have watched. How many movies is there in that? 3? Or is it just? I don't know either. I think I've watched the first one, but that's all. But that's not.
Like,
I mean,
that's the 20th or the 21st century of literature. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we're doing like the 18th and 19th century literature. Like, when I think of what it would be our modern days, like say 100 years or 200 years from now when students are studying, I think they're going to be going back to those stories.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say with Twilight, like 100 years from now or whatever. That would be literature to them.
Well, you got to look.
I hope not.
That's a vampire story, and Bram Stoker's Dracula was probably sensational for its time, and people probably rolled their eyes at it.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a good story, by the way.
Yeah, they used to throw those stories in like there's really cheap magazines in the 1800s called penny dreadfuls, and they weren't taken seriously. It was almost like a comic book is today, like the cheap paper and all that stuff. So yeah, so that was something not taken seriously. That is today.
So is there any concrete like definition to what literature is and what it isn't, or is it just open to interpretation?
Well, your first definition, Danny, is probably the classic definition of the word.
Yeah.
Like literature goes back to the Latin word literare, in tongue-tied, literare, meaning letters. Right, so anything, anything in letters, right? That's kind of
man.
That's the etymology of the word.
Yeah.
But it's confusing, right? Because we think about this in terms of most of the time. Whenever we take an English class today, we think about it like fiction, right? We might read a novel like Jane Eyre, right, as Lisa said, right? Or poems. Like if you take the English lit to 1800 class, it's radically different because you don't really read anything quite like what we're reading in here. It's all poems and plays, and some prose. So this class has got throwing you a curveball from day one because suddenly we're reading things like sermons, we're reading letters, we're reading pretty much Rollinson's diary of her time in captivity, her diary after the fact. That's something that, so a lot of the stuff that we're reading in these first couple of weeks of this class, historians might try to claim to it. Like, what's the difference between history and literature? Right? They're very clear. There's very clear subject related subjects in history and literature. So like what makes this a literature class and not a history class? That's something that we have to kind of ask ourselves over these first couple of weeks. So if I had to say anything on this, probably like Bridget said earlier, literature conveys emotions. Right? But I would add to that by saying complex ideas too. Like so much of what we're reading in these first couple of weeks, it's foundational for like who we are as Americans today. Let's start today by talking about John Winthrop. John Winthrop, who was our reading for last Friday. Let me get my page numbers here. I've got all my notes all over the place. So I asked you guys a question on the discussions. What's up with Winthrop's definition of America as a city on the hill? You know, what was he trying to achieve with that definition of city on a hill? Some of you guys wrote about that. Any of you guys who wrote about that, want to share your thoughts? What was Winthrop talking about by saying America is like a city on a hill?
I thought he was talking about like having everybody's eyes watching them all the time, and he didn't want to upset or make a mistake to anyone.
That's what I got from it too.
Yeah, like being an example for the rest of the world. Being held high on a pedestal, I guess.
Yeah, this passage is on page 188, by the way, in case some of you guys have your books handy. 188.
and go down that road with in the discussion with mine, but I go to church, and I know that it talks about a city on a hill cannot be hid. And I kind of thought maybe that he was trying to say that America couldn't be put on a back burner or ignored, is the way I was kind of interpreting it.
Right. So you guys are all on a great track here, right? He says that we should be an example for the rest of the world to follow, this type of moral example. He says this is an experiment unlike any other in history. So it's up to America to be that shining city, right? That example that the whole rest of the world looks up to. This is an idea that's called American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism. It's this idea that America, it starts with John Winthrop. It's this idea from the beginning that America is the greatest nation on earth, right? No, we are that city. We are the example that everybody follows from our democracy, even, right? Like American democracy is touted across the whole rest of the world. People look to America as an example. People not in America, wish to be Americans. Many of them do. So this is an idea that's followed us from the very beginning, right? That we are supposed to be this moral example for the rest of the world to follow. If we fail in our mission, right? If we fail in our spiritual quest to be that city, what's going to happen to the world? Right? That's kind of a question that Winthrop asked here. It's at the time this was a very visionary document. Right? It's he had no idea probably at the time, right, how much America would grow and prosper and what it would become. So what do you guys think of this idea of American exceptionalism, that something is special about us as Americans? Maybe it's something divine even. Do you guys agree with that idea, or you guys think we might be a little full of ourselves here?
I think there's a certain amount of ego involved.
Yeah. I mean, we do have the best military of all time, the best economy of all time, freedoms that most countries don't have. But I agree, there's still some of that ego there. But
Right. Yeah. So we have a superiority complex, right? We think we're better than everybody. So we are better than the British. No Anglophiles are allowed in here. Yeah, so I have known a few Anglophiles who hang British flags up in their office and stuff. Go ahead, Danny.
And plus, I feel like, people still look at us as some kind of beacon of hope. I mean, we've got the power. We've got the most power in the world to affect the world in a negative light or positive light. I mean, so, might as well use it for good, hopefully.
Right? Like people who want to immigrate here, right? They see us as this shining city.
Yeah. The American dream, everyone, around the world, wants to be a part of, or most people anyways.
Right. Compare that to maybe Hamas, right? Which says keep your values out of here, right? We have our own.
Yeah.
Like, why are you sticking your nose in our business? Right. So that's the thing, right? That America has become like the world police on the global stage, right? So what should we always throw our values on everybody else, Right? Look, that's part of like why is the source of so many conflicts that we have today. But we do see ourselves as the shining city still. I don't know. Did any of you guys watch the Ronald Reagan speech that I posted on Blackboard? Any of you guys see that?
I did not.
Yeah.
I had a couple things going on. I just didn't get to it.
Yeah. If you go back and look at that video at your class, I think I have it posted under like supplemental videos or something like that. But Winthrop's City on the Hill image has even been used by like several presidents over time. Most recently, Reagan, or most famously, not most recently, but most famously, Reagan did it in his farewell speech. Reagan was all about like optimism in America in the 80s, right? So he gave this speech like, we are the shining city still, right? So I would encourage you to watch that just to see how that rhetoric is even applied today.
It's still, whenever he talks about the city on a hill, he talks a lot about, I don't know, it makes me think of like transparency and accountability, and I feel like we don't have a lot of that. When it comes to politicians and rich businessmen and things like that.
Right. Yeah, we can't even open up an investigation into what happened on January the 6th. Right?
Yeah.
So we definitely
Right.
have accountability.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so they're filibustering that at the moment. But yeah, I mean, think about like war crimes that have been committed, right, by Americans. Right? Often, not to crap on America here. Right? I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
But right, accountability is something we just sometimes don't have. Winthrop calls for it here.
Yeah.
So yeah, an interesting idea. Donald Trump's whole political message: "Make America Great Again." Right? That's American exceptionalism. That's John Winthrop. Right. So foundational American rhetoric right here. Right. That's still being used today. So some of you guys mentioned here too the idea of religious freedom. I should probably mention about some of these colonials in Britain at the time. So we're talking early 17th century. In Britain at the time, Calvinism started spreading. Calvinism is a very much radical form of Christianity. That started up in the late 16th, early 17th centuries. So Calvinism is a branch of Protestants. Of course, if you guys think about Christianity, you got Protestants and Catholics. There was a time where all we had was Catholics in the Eastern Orthodox. Well, you guys know Martin Luther split from the Catholic Church. He formed the Protestant Reformation. You guys might know all this stuff from history class. And from there, all these different denominations of Protestants came about. Right? Think of all the churches around here are Protestant for the most part, unless it's a Catholic church. There's different types of Protestants. Well, the Calvinists came from the theologian named John Calvin, who argued that God is an all-knowing, all-powerful God. So in being all-knowing, he knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be damned before they're even born, right? So he knows when somebody's born that they're either going to hell or heaven. Right? He knows. Think about it like, I always like to explain Calvinism. Think about it like a slot machine. Right? God can see where the slot machine is going for our entire lives. Right? He can see the numbers. Right? that's the best way that I know how to explain Calvinism.
Yeah. So there is no free will. Basically, it's all predetermined.
Right.
Yeah.
That you didn't have a choice.
Now that gets complicated, because Calvinists argue that we do have free will. Just because God knows where we're going doesn't mean we don't have the ability to make that choice. Right. So
We
it's
can
not like
change your destiny.
right. Yeah. So some Calvinists would qualify that, but it's a complicated matter. But that affects our Rollinson text for today. That's something I'd like to talk about when we talk about Rollinson. But as the century went on, the Calvinists became religious extremists in England. They didn't like things like pomp and ceremony and in church worship, right? So they didn't like music, for instance, in the church. They didn't like doing things like the Eucharist. Right? So they wanted it to keep it as simple as possible. But the Calvinists then became religious extremists, and they were persecuted is a strong word to use about them, because as the century went on, they became the dominant political force in England. England sort of became more and more extreme as the 17th century progressed. And it eventually led to a civil war in England. The Calvinists took over Parliament, right? And the king at the time was very sympathetic to Catholics. So they even overthrew the king and set up a temporary dictatorship in England ruled by Oliver Cromwell. So we're talking 1620s, so we're talking about 30 or 40 years before that Civil War took place, because that took place in the 1650s. So yeah, saying that they were persecuted, maybe a little bit, but like I said, as the further they went, the more they took power. But a lot of these people who were coming to America in the Massachusetts Bay Colony were these extremists. Danny, you made mention that you found it ironic that folks who wanted religious freedom did not.
We're not tolerant towards other beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of history there. Right? Rhode Island was founded, for instance, because Rhode Island didn't agree with what Massachusetts was doing. So I forget which. It explains it in their book with Robert Williams. I forget what the idea was, why they differed. Like, these people differed from Massachusetts, so they just went on to form Rhode Island. So, yeah, lots of persecution, as we'll see on Friday with Cotton Mather. Right, we all know about the witch trials that sprang up. That was about 3 or 4 generations after John Winthrop. But not exactly very tolerant during this time. Even about other forms of Christianity. I mean, if you didn't agree with this doctrine, you can go your merry way. Go found your own colony. Right. So that's pretty much how it worked. As we see for this week, a lot of this literature is grounded in Christianity, in Calvinist Christianity. Next week's going to be a whole different story when we talk about the Revolution era, because a lot of those Revolution founding father writers, they weren't so grounded in Christianity, most of them, as we'll see next week. Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, no, those guys were very secular So whenever we ask the question, was America founded as a Christian nation? Right. Well, maybe early with Massachusetts Bay Colony, but by the time we get to like the founding fathers, you guys will see a much more secular shift just based on the readings that we're going to do. So that's a point I wanted to make as far as lecture goes. Any thoughts on questions about any of this? Massachusetts Bay Colony. I should make mention that John Smith's colony, the Virginia colony, was founded for a different reason. Right? The Virginia colony was first, actually. And they were founded on a commercial charter. So the Virginia colony had nothing to do with religion. And it was just founded on a commercial charter. As you guys read with John Smith, there was lots of struggles. Like these people landed, they didn't even know how to feed themselves. Right. So they didn't know how to plant corn or anything. Right? So, that first winter in the Virginia colony was famous for being really treacherous. Most of the people died.
Yep.
Right. So John Smith's letter or journal gives a nice account of that. If it wouldn't have been for the natives, they would have probably all died. Right. So he talks a lot about the natives in that passage. So lots of stuff going on here. I should probably also ground us a little bit in slavery. Slavery is going to be a big theme in this course. This time period, the early 17th century, they hadn't quite yet defined like who should be a slave or not. So at this time period, you saw all kinds of different slaves. They enslaved Indians. Of course, you guys know that this is when the triangle trade started from Europe to Africa to the American colonies with Africans. Right. So at this time period, anybody could be a slave, right? But by the time we get to next week, they had determined that slavery was based on race. If you go back and look, let's go back and read through like ancient Roman history. Ancient Romans just took slaves. It didn't matter like what color their skin was or whatever. And that's what happened in the beginning of America. Actually, one of the very first slave owners was a black man, which is interesting.
Just the powerful, just overtaking the weaker person, basically.
Pretty much. But as the century went on, there was lots of like discussions, like why does a black person make a good slave, but not an Indian? Right? If you guys think about it, like why did we just kill the Indians? Like why didn't they make them slaves? Right? It sounds like a horrible question to ask. Right? But they had reasoned that the Indians were too prideful and too stubborn, right, to be slaves. That was the main reason that they used. Like Columbus enslaved the people in Hispaniola and in Haiti, I had to make a brief mention of that to get us going too. We don't really see it too much today, but it is there. And it's definitely going to be there starting next week on through the rest of the class. So just to ground us a little bit in that discourse.
Like today you feel kind of like the Mexicans are being enslaved to us because like they're much cheaper labor. And I don't know if, legally like jobs that's on payroll, they can't get by with it, but there are a lot of jobs that are being offered to them that people just pay them under their table and it's a lot less wages.
Right. Yeah. Later later in the class, we're going to read a document from a guy who argues that every society needs a working class that you exploit. Right. So this was during like the heyday, like right before the Civil War. And to build on what you're saying, Bridget, this guy said that everybody needs this class of people. He called it the mudsill class. And we need people to exploit. So he argues, like, of course, he paints this really idealistic picture. This is a senator from South Carolina who made this argument. He made the argument, like in the South, they treat their slaves good, they feed them, they keep them happy, right? Compare that to the North, where you have people working low wages in factories. He kind of throws out a warning. He's like, warning, guys, our mudsill class can't vote, but yours can, right? So better watch out, right? The lower classes might take over,
right?
But you're right, Bridget. I mean, like today you have to ask yourself, well, who takes certain kinds of jobs, right? So there's certain types of jobs that oftentimes you don't see like white people take.
You don't see white people or certain pertain Americans do.
Right. Yeah, like I don't know. Like for instance, like a hotel worker, right? You don't really see a lot of like maids, right, who are white people. Right. That's oftentimes a job that's thrown out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, it's a complicated matter. Right. And so the slavery is going to be something that we discuss through this whole class. I mean, it's going to be, you can't talk about America before 1865 without talking about the specter of slavery. It starts in the very beginning. As the century goes on, as the further we go, the more it's going to become a hot issue. Anybody who tells you that the Civil War was not about slavery is wrong. Okay, I'll just say that. Anybody that says it's not about slavery is wrong. I'll explain more why when we get there. Right? But as we'll see, slavery is a hot issue in class. But the big issue this week is natives. Right? This is our week to talk about Native Americans for the most part. I asked the question from at the beginning of class, what is literature? Right? We agreed that it's stuff that's written down. Well, a lot of the problem as you guys might notice, a lot of this stuff that talks about Native Americans is written by white European settlers. Right? So we don't really get much perspective from the Native Americans here. Why is that? Because they didn't have a written language.
They didn't write. They didn't know how to do that. They use like on their things is just like symbols and stuff, and signs. They didn't really have a written, like you said, a written language.
Okay. So if you look through our textbook, one of the earliest readings in here, you guys can check these out on your own. I have a reason why I don't teach these, but if you look early in the textbook, right around page 30 to 40, in that area, you see a lot of creation stories. So they've put these creation stories. We get different types of creation stories about the beginning of the world. So you have the Iroquois creation story, the Navajo, the Winnebago trickster cycle. So a lot of these creation stories were kind of told in the oral form. Right? It's kind of like epic poems from ancient Greece. Right? They were told in a performance. Right? They weren't written down; they were performed. Well, those are all interesting. The reason why I don't start the class with them is because all of these came filtered through Europeans, right? So if you read through them, lots of times like they'll have biblical imagery in there because like they'll change the Indian story to Christianize it, right? So I wanted to at least make you aware of those. Like that's really in the early get-go the only like Native American literature that we get, but from their perspective. But it's not even really from their perspective because it comes filtered through our perspective. So it's a whole complicated issue. Like, how do we figure out the truth here? Like, what is the truth? So let's segue into talking about Mary Rollinson here. Mary Rollinson. In talking about Mary Rollinson, I should probably also mention nature here, right? If you guys remember the Columbus letter, lots of you guys wrote about it. Nature in Columbus was painted as America's like an Eden. America's this lush forest, full of wonder and beautiful sights. Right. Well, we get to Mary Rollinson, it's the complete opposite. Right? We have a dark, dangerous wilderness full of savages and beasts, like lions ready to devour their prey. Right? She's very harsh. Right? This is not an American Eden. Right? This is a tough place to be. It's almost like an Old Testament like wilderness that you go to test for your sin, that you go to test yourself with God.
Ooh, Old Testament is a good way to describe that.
Right. Yeah. She quotes from the, I don't know if you guys noticed, but she often like quotes from the Bible, especially Old Testament.
It's mostly Psalms and things.
The Psalms.
There's a lot of Hezekiah in it.
Yeah. The genre that she's writing in is called a Jeremiad, and that comes from, of course, the book of Jeremiah. Right, and this is Jeremiah is called like a long lamentation. Right, it's a mournful literature. It's mourning some type of bad calamity that's happened. Right, so lots of our literature is Jeremiah, takes the Jeremiah type of form. This is one of the earliest examples. So this is an interesting document. We have, so to even like come up with like, what do we take from it? Like how much objective fact can we take from this narrative? Because she was clearly biased. Who wouldn't be though? I mean, the woman saw people killed in front of her. Her child was shot. Her child died.
Right. She was like living through hell, but yet she still had the goodness of God watching out for her and providing for her along the way. And she was
go ahead. I don't know if anybody else has read the story of Mary Draper Ingalls, but it kind of blew my mind a little bit about how similar their stories were, especially in the beginning, because I was sitting and thinking that maybe Mary Draper Ingalls had just completely ripped off this woman's tale, and then it took a twist and there was a major difference and stuff. But it kind of blew my mind a little bit, just how similar their two stories were.
Yeah, this was a whole genre. This type of thing happened so much that it spawned a whole genre of captivity stories. Right? Natives had a different view of family than Europeans do. Natives oftentimes took these captives and they would try to adopt them, assimilate them into Indian culture. Right? So they didn't have an idea of like we're Indians because of our skin or whatever. You know, they thought that they could take these people and adopt them into their family units. And it happened so much that you had this whole genre spring up of captivity tales. Rollinson's one. You mentioned another one. You mentioned another one there, Lisa. Tons of these stories sprang up because it happened so much. Different types of Indians did different types of things with their captives too. Like what happened to Rollinson's probably pretty mild. Like a lot of stuff that was happening in the Southwest, for instance, it was mostly Spanish settlers in the Southwest part of the United States. A lot of what was happening to them was way more extreme than what was happening in the English colonies and on the East Coast. Yeah, it's also the plot of a lot of like Westerns, right? And you guys, I don't know if you guys like watch old Western films, right? But there's one I teach called The Searchers, starring John Wayne. Right? That one's about his niece gets captured at a young age. Well, she becomes an Indian, right? She becomes an Indian because from that young age, we talk about nature and nurture. Right? From a young age, she was taught to be an Indian because she didn't remember how to be white, right? So that's the whole conflict of that movie.
That's what it reminded me of, was a Western, because I've watched them with my dad a lot, and that was my first thought.
So you've seen Westerns kind of like that?
Yes, I think is that one that you was talking about? That's a movie too, ain't it? I think I've watched that.
Yeah, it's a 1956 film called The Searchers, starring John Wayne. It's one of John Wayne's best ever roles. I would recommend you guys check it out. He plays this really hateful, like almost racist character in it. He tries to kill his own niece in the movie because she's now a savage. Right? She's not her anymore. She's a savage. Right? So John Wayne's character tries to kill his own niece in the film. It's interesting stuff, like seeing how the different types of people became acclimated to this culture. But sometimes even like at an older age, people might have been captured older, but they would marry into native society and become natives. Like they didn't have any. There wasn't any for natives. There wasn't any idea like we're natives. They're not, right? They thought that they could adopt everyone into their culture. So interesting stuff here with Rollinson. What do you guys think of Rollinson? Like we started going along that line. Like Bridget said, she took like a more sympathetic view of Rollinson, right? But as you guys read it, did you feel sorry for Rollinson, or did you sometimes roll your eyes and say, "I wish this woman would stop complaining already"?
Yeah, she's a little whiny. Yeah.
I don't know. I was thinking she was one tough cookie.
Yeah, definitely. Considering what she'd been through, that's for sure. She was tough.
Yes, because I would have probably died after the first night or two.
Oh no, I would have too. But to me, it was like her daughter dying and stuff. I would have not functioned past that.
It's tough, man.
Right. But she points that out. She says things that I did not think that I would ever eat.
Yeah.
I come to find was savory to my mouth. I mean, it was sweet. Because you have to realize when you're put into a life or death situation, you find things that you say you would never do, you do, in order to survive.
Yeah, every single time she found rock bottom, she found a scripture to help her through it.
That's what I like the most about it was because I take a lot of comfort in my faith and stuff, and I like that she turned to God in it, and I enjoyed that part of it.
Me too. I felt like her story was such an inspiration, and a story that God is love and a provider and kind of like a redeemer, whatever. But the second one that we read about that guy, it was like damnation and hell.
Oh no, listen, I had a major problem with part of that.
It was hard for me to read that one. Like,
yeah. That reminded me of growing up in the Southern Baptist church.
Are you talking about the sermon?
Scare the hell out of you.
Are you talking about the sermon?
Yeah.
Because Tasha and I are friends. And I texted her earlier and I told her, I said, I did not like that this man was telling me God hates you if you're not a Christian, because the exact opposite is true.
I know. It was like, it was just like, shoo, that one was hard.
Yeah, that was very hard to read.
Hate to sin, not the sinner.
Exactly right. That's very well said.
I think it was so much that you actually felt like you were dangling over the people.
Yeah. Well, his description, yeah, comparing people to the spider, and God had his, he's ready to squash you.
My feet got hot a few times.
Yeah, it's some pretty harrowing stuff. I was reading up on Jonathan Edwards' life before class. Apparently, he got so like hardcore about this stuff that they kicked him out of being the pastor of his own church. Like, they voted like 80-20 to kick him out of being pastor.
Well, nobody probably wanted to go.
Yeah, he sounds like a fun guy to hang out with, don't he?
If you were the one that likes to just sit and listen. Because I think that he just seemed like he was so, he was dead set on his beliefs that there was nothing going to change him. Like, we all sin and fall short, But I think in his explaining, no, there was no room for error.
Yeah. Well, who was it? Paul said, I die daily. I mean, you've got to ask forgiveness daily in this walk. And he's what I always called a hard shell Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're the hard shell Baptists. I go to the free will Baptist. We like chicken and dinners.
Look, honey, I'm Pentecostal.
Well, see, y'all right there with us.
See, that's what me and Lisa always kid about, because we're best friends, but she's the Baptist and I'm the Pentecostal too. We have a friend that is very opinionated about certain things. I'm like, no, you have to remember I'm Pentecostal when it comes to this.
She was who she's talking about. She was raised by a deacon at my church who's since passed away, but no, she is to the bone Baptist. And me and my husband, who's deacon at our church now, we're kind of like, you can't say what God is going to give you. I mean, there's spiritual gifts, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, just fried chicken.
Pentecostal though, we have the hot dogs.
Hot dogs. Started to say that to Bridget and didn't want to offend her.
True.
I always say Methodist is the spaghetti and the fish fries.
Yeah.
But one good thing about it though, that you can come from, just like me and Lisa, we often discuss these things. It's not an argumental thing. I appreciate, her religion, and I mean, we're still, praying to the same God and everything. I don't think that we should. It gets hairy sometimes, because not with me and Lisa, but it gets hairy sometimes because people don't want to see other people's religion as a religion. It's Christianity, but that's what they believe in. I think that we should have the respect. That's what they believe in, and to take it into consideration.
You know, that's something that I've always tried to teach my daughter. She's getting ready to graduate high school. And as much as I am a Christian, I've always taught her and shown her that you can be an atheist and you're going to have my respect. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Jew, you can be whatever you want to be, and you're going to have my respect. I'm not going to treat you badly because I believe one way and you believe another. And you can't make a lot of people understand that in today's society.
You'll get respect back by being like that, I think. Yeah.
Well, you know, that's going back to the whole United States thing, the city on the hill, you know, that we were talking about. You know, it is a, you know, we have that ability to have those differences and to be able to talk about it and discuss it without, you know.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of some of this rhetoric that was happening in Edwards? Like Danny mentioned the spider image.
Yeah.
Like we're like spiders dangling over a fire. It's only because of God's mercy that he just doesn't drop us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. At any moment. Yeah.
He talks about how at any moment, don't be cocky, right, about your good health, because at any moment God can pull the plug.
You know, the way I look at that, you're never going to win a soul by only showing them the bad side of it. You have to know that there's love and peace to be found too.
I like to think, you know, you don't know God's ways, but I mean, what kind of God would, you know, want someone to only worship them? So, you know, out of fear, so they don't go to hell. You know, that's yeah.
Well, a lot of people take the fear God and keep his commandments thing literally, and fearing God is only respecting God.
Yeah.
Yeah, Edwards came from this Calvinist line, right?
Mhm.
Calvinists argued that the original sin made mankind totally depraved in the eyes of God. Like we're stench in God's nose, right? Only by His grace can that total depravity be forgiven. And the Calvinists are so hardcore that they argue that there's a finite amount of people who can be saved. They call those people the elect. Right? They even have like a number. Like I think it's like in the total history of mankind, only like 144,000 people will be saved. Right? They truly saved.
Yeah.
That's what the Calvinists argue. Have any of you guys heard rhetoric like?
We've heard that 144,000 stuff. Preacher at my church, he kind of described it best. He says that God does have a number, and it's that all should come to repentance, and that number is all. But he does give us a free will, and that's what makes him God. Because if he didn't give us the free will to choose for ourselves, then he wouldn't be a loving God. He'd kind of be a dictator type of God.
And plus, that just sounds rough to me. It's like even people, it's like they spend their whole entire life devoting their life to God, and they still might go to hell, even when, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what it sounds like, anyways. And
I guess it was a way for the Calvin to rule out the fake Christians, right?
Yeah.
He's like, lots of people say they're Christians, but are they really in their heart?
I'm sure it made people even question their own faith and how strong their faith was. And yeah.
No, you're 100% correct. I mean, I get weak, and I was telling Tasha the other day and a friend of ours that I've struggled lately. I mean, my mom's having some health issues. She was just diagnosed with cancer, and my dad's in bad health, and I've had some health issues, and it's just I've got a little weak, and I've let myself start handling some language I shouldn't handle, and having an attitude that I shouldn't have, and it's just you got to keep your eyes focused and keep your eyes centered. And I kind of got to the left of that, but my friends who I love very dearly have kind of helped me get centered again.
Right. So yeah, no one is perfect in their faith.
No.
That's the struggle, right?
Was there anything going on this time, like were people starting to veer off away from God to cause him to, preach such a, message like this?
Yeah, yeah. This was written in the 1730s, I think, 1742, according to their text. At this time period, so this is the last text that's closely approaching the Revolutionary period, the Enlightenment period. So about this time period, there was a widespread secularization across the American colonies. A lot of that was due to science, a lot of science that was springing up. You guys might have heard about people like John Locke, right? Isaac Newton, right? All those different thinkers.
Yeah.
All those different thinkers at the time caused more of a secular wave.
Yeah, makes sense.
This sermon's definitely a reaction to that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. That was a really good question that I had never really thought about.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
Because if, even reading about Columbus and everything, they always give thanks to God. It's like they always made that point. And maybe this was a point in that time where things were changing, and maybe it's why he was so demanding, trying to get people to, wake up.
Yeah.
But, looking further down the road, I mean, if his side would have won out, then maybe we wouldn't have freedom of speech and freedom of religion today, though, trying to be, devil's advocate here.
Are you talking about Edwards's perspective?
Yeah, he was talking about, it was the rise of science and secularism. I mean, if Edwards's, narrative would have won out, then maybe we wouldn't have, freedom of religion and speech that we do today, like, Jefferson, was for and stuff. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the reason for that was based on the science, but it was also because people looked back a couple of decades and saw what the Puritans did to the witch trials and stuff. Right? That caused almost this wide distrust too. So I wouldn't say that the witch trials are single-handedly the cause of the Enlightenment in America, but it didn't hurt. Right? As far as that goes. Yeah, Edwards was trying to revive that old spirit of Puritanism that started up, in the early days of the colonies with Winthrop. Of all the things that we read for today, I think this one is the most what we would call literary, right? Just because it does invoke so many emotions, right? You read this thing and you think, holy crap, right? I better get my act together, right? That's, in logic, they call this the appeal to fear, right? The appeal to fear. It's a fallacy that you can't commit. The appeal to fear. He's definitely appealing to our fears here, right? Going to hell and stuff. There's a medieval theologian called Pascal. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Pascal, but there's an idea called Pascal's wager. And Pascal says, okay, you can either believe in God or not believe in God, right? But look at it this way: if you believe in God, you become a Christian, great. Right? You can go to heaven. So if you don't believe in God, and there really is a God, you really want to take that chance, right? So he says you might as well be a Christian, right? Just because.
Yeah. Right? What you got to lose,
that's definitely, this whole sermon definitely reminds me of that idea.
Yeah.
it's a really practical way to look at it, right? Do you really want to take that chance?
Yeah.
I wondered when he gave this sermon, I mean, was he in like a church? Was he a hacker like the Baptists? Was he more reserved like some other denominations? Was he all over the place in a shouting like a Pentecostal? I would like to go back in time and hear him say it.
From my understanding, he was pretty like fire and brimstone. Like he wrote this whole thing out and delivered it in a speech. But yeah, it was very, very fire and brimstone.
I feel like if I was there, I would have been like scared a little bit.
I feel like I've heard similar, not Southern Baptists, they're hardcore.
Like I remember being in a church service when I was young, but you hear these older people talking about things, and I remember being so scared because everybody was like, the Lord's coming back tonight, and there was like this huge thunderstorm that happened that night, and I was might have been 8 years old, and I remember laying in that bed scared to death. Like, okay, is this it? Oh God, what do I do? Like, I remember that. So I could not imagine being in the congregation listening to this man. Like,
people to get up out of the altar.
Oh, I'm sure that the congregation that wanted to throw him out was the one listening to this. Like, I'm sure. But I remember that fear as a child. I mean, and that's when I really didn't understand the whole Christianity thing. But being older and understanding it, and then you read this, you're like, oh God, there's no room for error at all.
Yeah, I saw a meme a while back, like if you grew up as a Christian kid, right? Like anytime, like you would like that when you were that age, like 10 or 11 or something, and you walked into a room and no one was there, and like you thought the rapture happened or whatever, you got left behind, right?
It's not specific to kids. I have a story. My mother-in-law, God bless her heart, she was as lost as a ball in high weeds, and my father-in-law had already got saved, and they were down at McDonald's, and they both went in and used the restroom and everything. Well, he came out before her, and she didn't know. And he said he was sitting there in that truck and said she was walking across the parking lot looking up in the sky. She opened the truck door and he said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I was just looking to see if I could see your feet." Because she thought that he had been raptured because she couldn't find him. But she was like, "I was just looking to see if I could see your feet as you're going up." Bless her heart.
That's hilarious. Yeah, we probably all have a story like that in some respect. If you grew up in a church.
Well, me and my husband we raised our kids in church, and it was like there was no exception. Like, you were going until you got to a certain age. You were going, and my littlest one, she couldn't really talk really good, but here she's 20 now. She doesn't shut up. She talks real good. But she was sitting there. She knew that she had listened to that preacher, but she knew that whenever that preacher stopped, she could go home. So we sat like the third pew back. Okay, it's not like he couldn't hear, but thank God he was in a way of preaching, because she just got tired and she wanted to go home, and she couldn't even say "you" yet, but she said, "Who shut up me, go home." And so and they talk about things that happen in church, like people behind us be like, "Your kids are so good," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, you don't see me up there pinching them and slapping them on the leg like you wait till you get home, But we've all been there. There's so many church stories that you can tell.
Oh yeah. We have what we call the cool kid corner up at our church, and it's just where all the teenagers go and sit. And I have turned and looked at my daughters so many times that now all I got to do is turn my head and every one of them shut up. because she knows you can talk while they're singing, you can talk before church starts, but when that preacher hits that floor, you better shut up.
It's a respect thing.
Right.
Which me and Lisa, we work in an after school program with kids first grade through 12th, so we know about this disrespect thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I'm very fortunate with as a college teacher that I don't have to deal with like the K to 12 teachers do.
That's why I'm going in. God help me.
I've done this. I think Tash has done this for 10 years, and I've been here almost 8. And they're wonderful kids, and it's always the meanest ones that you get the closest to. And I don't know if it's because they spent so long virtual and stuff like that, but they're almost feral right now.
That's a good way of putting it. You know, inside the schools, we make a joke. Oh my God, was it a full moon? Is it going to be a full moon tonight? Like, I was just saying this today. I'm like, it's going to be a super moon because, some of these kids, you know. But like Lisa said, you get attached to them and everything.
Let's
all y'all making me second guess my career decisions.
No,
Yeah, same here. I'm gonna switch my major.
Listen, it is so worth it because this is the only college education I've got, and after school was kind of thrust into my lap happily. But whenever you've got that one little kid, and it's usually a little foster kid who you know has been beaten or starved or something like that, and they want a hug, and they come straight to you because you're their safe person and stuff. That it makes every day so worth it.
Okay, the one that says iPhone. What's your name?
Sydney.
Okay, how old are you? Not to be nosy, but
I'm 18. I just graduated 3 days ago.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations.
Because I was going to say you could have worked in our summer program and found out if you really wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah.
It is a rewarding job, though, right, Dr. Yeager?
It is. I wouldn't do anything else.
Where'd you graduate from?
East.
Oh, okay. My daughter graduates from Man on Thursday.
Oh, I love the Man people down there.
Honey, I'm a transplant. I'm from Harts Creek, and I wouldn't live anywhere but Man. I love it here.
Their volleyball. I played volleyball like all 4 years of high school, so I know a lot of those girls down there and their coach, and they're all great.
Orlando?
What is it?
Orlando?
Yeah, Orlando. That's
probably why you look familiar, because my daughter just graduated 2 years ago and she was a volleyball player.
Yeah.
Addison
Orlando was
Gibson.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. She actually went to Bethany to play volleyball, and she played one term, and she said, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to focus on my career, what I'm going to do. And she wants to be a doctor. So, and
that was my first choice. And then I started second guessing myself.
Well, you'll do great, I'm sure.
My biggest advice is just take your time. You'll figure out what you want to do. Right? I think they sometimes try to put people in boxes too quick in early college.
Yes, because they make you choose your career path in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
My daughter wanted to be a journalist in the 7th grade. Now she wants to be a nurse.
Hey, I'm 32. I didn't really figure it out until this past year, and I still question it. So, but
just don't take as long as we did. Like me and Lisa took like 25 years. Don't wait that long.
Oh, if I could go back to when I was 18 or 19 and getting off dad's money and living at home, and it'd been a lot easier. But some lessons don't work like that, Yeah.
When you thought you had it bad, right, Danny? But really now sitting there, you had it good.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
One of my daughter's friends said, I think I'm just going to take a semester off. I said, listen, don't do that, because my semester turned into 23 years. And then Tasha just showed up one day and told me, said, hey, we're going to roll in college. And here I am.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, fun fact. Danny was only one grade below me in school, and we've been good friends since then.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I used to go to his house. Yeah, I used to go to his house and play video games. And yeah, it was probably 13, maybe younger, 13, 14. Yeah.
And now we both man Wyoming County campus. We're the heart and soul. Don't tell David that.
No.
Well, let's get back on the rails a little bit here. Yeah. And like we kind of segued to talking about Edwards. Let's go back to Rollinson here. And we were talking about like how much you felt her sympathy for her plight and all this stuff. Then we kind of segued over to Edwards. But yeah, I don't know. So you guys, are most of you guys in the consensus that you felt badly for, or was there some of you guys view her more negatively? I had one student once who was like, she was such a, right?
Nah, considering what she's been through, I don't blame, that's a struggle, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's the human nature to.
Yeah. She was whiny and stuff, but it was definitely warranted, I guess. Yeah.
Well, even anybody that deserves or is warranted in whining at a certain point, you just think to yourself, my God, will you shut up?
I'd have been right there with her whining. I know it.
But everything that she went through, it could have been a lot worse as far as, like, more than just whining. Like,
yeah. She was also pretty patient. I mean, I can't find what page number, but I mean, there was one English woman they captured that wasn't so lucky. I mean, she wasn't patient and composed, and they beat her to death. So her composure definitely helped her.
The fourth remove, there was a pregnant woman who was murdered.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that. I was going to ask if I was crazy or if I was just imagining something while I was reading. Or
No, you did not. There was a pregnant woman murdered in the fourth remove.
What did that mean? The remove by like, because at first I thought it was like the first day, the second day, and then she went spans of whole weeks, and I was confused.
That pretty much means like every time they got up and moved to a different camp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was.
She says that every time that they did something mischievous or did something bad, they moved.
Yeah, and there was 20 of them in total. I think it did go over a couple of weeks before she was reintegrated back into European society.
I mean, I overall thought that the Indians, I mean, yeah, there were some bad moments, but overall, I think they treated her fairly decent. I mean, she always had food, and I mean, they were giving her food, and she was trading, trading clothes for food and other things. And I thought it could have been a lot worse for her, that's for sure.
Now, there's some who treat her poorly. Like there was the one person who threw ashes in her eyes.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
Wasn't that the wife of the one she called her master?
Mm-hmm.
That did that?
Yeah, the mistress. Yeah.
Oh.
And there's other ones that treat her well. Like some people give her food just because, right? They don't really have to. She's not part of their unit, but they still give her food.
And even the master, I mean, he let her just like go off to see her kids, and I mean, I guess he trusts her to come back. And
I noticed that too, and that kind of surprised me because if I had somebody captive, I wasn't going to let them just walk a mile to go see their son.
No, I'd be out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if she's walking and they got like horses and stuff, they can always just go grab her real quick. But
True. And probably, like you said, the conditions of the forest as well. I mean, she would just die out in the woods somewhere, probably.
yeah,
Probably
especially that she wasn't
They
familiar.
didn't want her to die, though. They wanted her as like a ransom type thing, right?
Right. Yeah, they always threaten to bash her skull in and stuff like that throughout the
Yeah,
story.
they lied to her about her husband, saying that he was dead when he wasn't. That's pretty messed up.
Yeah, she uses some interesting rhetoric. Something that I noticed rereading it. You know, she pretty much says there's this Old Testament idea of a scourge, right? A scourge. Like sometimes, like you have a rule, like King Ahab. Right? Sometimes you have a ruler so bad that it's meant to punish people for their. You have something that happening so bad that it's meant to punish God, God's meaning to punish you for a whole society, even for their collective sins. Right? This is an idea of a scourge. Like I said, King Ahab and Jezebel are probably the best biblical examples to get there. But she even compares this to a scourge. She says this is God punishing us as a society for our sins, the fact that these natives are even doing this. I thought that was an interesting idea that I actually didn't have it in my plan until I reread it today. And I was like, whoa, that's an interesting thought that she threw in. That was pretty close to the end when she mentions that. 295 is the passage I wrote down, page 295, where she does that. You guys don't have to turn to that. That's just as a reference, 295. I don't know. What do you guys think of that idea of a scourge? That God sometimes sends such a terrible leader. I think that's meant to punish us. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's kind of Old Testament in
Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, not to that extent, I guess, but
that's kind of. But you can anger God, and you can change God's mind.
Right. Sometimes I do think God punishes us.
Yes.
Right. That's not something we've ever thought about as Americans too much, just because we can replace our leaders.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like especially in England back then, like even have awful kings, right? That was this person a scourge? Right. That's definitely an idea in a monarchy type of society.
I don't wonder what she was saying. It was on the same page, 239, but sounded like she was talking about, let's see, talking about strangely did the Lord provide for them. Despite the destruction of many English, and he did not one time see one man, one woman, or a child die with hunger. So I mean, despite what they did, I mean, she was still basically saying, God still provided for them.
Right. Yeah, that was pretty close to the end too. Mm-hmm.
I didn't get the whole thing read. I was rushing around today, but I enjoyed what I read of it, and it kind of her faith, I guess, is what I enjoyed about it. Her strength, because God knows I wouldn't have been able to do it.
So here's
God kept right. She kept thanking God because for whatever she was going through, He still managed to give her the strength to get through it.
So here's a question for you guys. What can we learn about Native Americans from reading this? Because this is clearly a biased document written by a very emotional person, right? And rightfully so.
I think the takeaway from it was, and her, if anybody, would have had a right of the reason to have embellished and made them demons, I guess is what you could say, is that she showed that they are human and they are compassionate and they weren't the savages that people claimed that they were.
And then coming from their side, I mean, who's these people showing up here trying to take our land? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, this conflict was called King Philip's War. King Philip's War. She actually talked about meeting King Philip.
And he was nice to her, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, she made him a shirt, I think, at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, and he paid her every time she made something. He paid her with something.
And it started for the reason that Danny just said, right? The natives were mad because they were encroaching on the colonists were encroaching on their old lands, right? So
I think that historians and people, even us, we kind of forget about that, and we try to vilify these people as, oh, they were savages and they were attacking white people and stuff like that. But we literally came in and pushed them from their home onto little reservations. I would be mad if they did that to us. I would be mad.
Protect their property, right?
It's just like, if we got invaded, right now, we'd be pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
Well, and just like today, there are talks like, of wanting to take the guns and stuff from people's homes and remove things like that and do things. And how many of you have family members that are in an uproar about that and is not going to let it happen?
I think it's why we can have guns in our house, so we don't get it invaded.
Right.
Right.
Protection.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely two-sided, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, we get this one side of the Europeans. What about like their customs and manners and all that type of stuff? Did you guys notice anything interesting in that regard?
She talked about their dancing and painting of their face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The red eyes.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I noticed that I think John Smith said a lot about their black skin, and then she mentioned a lot about their black skin. Is that just like their kind of general term for saying, like, because they were darker skinned than us?
I took it as like war paint. That's kind of what I was thinking of, but I might be wrong.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I thought of it as war paint too, because it was kind of in the same general area where he was describing. I didn't really think much of it, but now that you mention it,
I focus on weird stuff sometimes.
Well, there was the one passage about how an Indian dressed up like a British guy and was wearing British clothes. Then she sees his face, it's the darker skin. She's like, oh man, like, the British guy's a lot more handsome than that.
Yeah.
Right. So you guys are right to point this out because you're seeing it play out, right? How race is starting to become a concept here, right? It was a concept that was gradually evolving at this time period. Heck, we're going from 1492 to 1730 just in this class today. Right, but you can kind of see how this is shaping up and growing the further we go. What about the John Smith? We haven't talked about John. That's the one text we haven't talked about yet. What did you guys think of that?
I've been waiting for this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that he embellished it, but it got to the point that, how if you were to go and catch a fish and it was about 4 inches long, and in 2 years it was like a 17-pound lunker that broke your rod in half, that's kind of how I feel about John Smith's story.
I thought that was good. Man, I thought it was just like the Disney movie. I mean, I think nine out of 10 people, if you ask them what was the story, they'd point you right to the Disney movie, and it's really nothing like that.
In the Disney movie, he's this like blonde hunk.
Yeah.
In reality, he was a very ugly man. Like if you look at his picture.
But correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never watched Pocahontas. Didn't they have her marry him at the end of that movie, or am I crazy?
I think they did, yeah.
Because it shocked me last semester in history. I was like, well, she didn't marry him at all.
No, I was actually.
No, because I thought she married him too.
Okay.
Something that I found out was John Smith was 27 years old when they first met, and Pocahontas was only like 10 or 11 years old at this time. So, yeah.
She did marry a John, but he was John Raw.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting that they really didn't say a whole lot about Pocahontas in here.
No,
But
that
it kind of left me wondering why, because we are used to like it was a romantic thing, But why did she save him? Why did she choose to save him? Do you think like she's seen the humanity of him that maybe the other Indians didn't?
It said in the book it was like a theatrical type of thing, and
Yeah, kind of like they acted it out to make it look like saving him to garner sympathy for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just like you're just reading along. It's like, bam, there she is. She
And
came
then
out of nowhere and just
She was never
laid over top of him.
Mm-mm.
And then bam, she's gone. And we don't
I mean,
know what happened to her.
Just
Yeah,
that
I mean,
one scene.
I guess Pocahontas, it's really about John Smith, I guess. Pocahontas was just there. I guess you would call her a noble savage, as they say. And that's pretty much the extent of her in that.
But even though we were talking about the other woman, even though they went through like torture and everything, they were still good to him. Like they fed him for days, They were good to him, even though they were planning on killing him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm still confused as to why the purpose of, if it was theatrical with him, Pocahontas saving John Smith, what was the purpose of that? Is it, to get in?
Yeah, I thought about this all day, and I actually had a meeting at the school, and I just got thinking about this, and I was like, let me ask you a question, to this man. I was like, I got to discuss this after a while. But I was thinking, like, maybe she's seen that he was going to be more of an asset to them, keeping him alive, than if they killed him. And maybe they were so angered at him that they couldn't see that part of it. That's what I was thinking.
It said the long term, like the goals of the tribe was to make I think it said to make like the British colony like a branch, like they would have to go through the Indians or something to that extent. Let me find it.
From my understanding, what Danny said about the noble savage image is how I've always interpreted this, right? Like there are certain natives who are noble and stoic, right? Who despite their barbaric culture exhibit a good inner nature, right? That's the idea of the noble savage. You guys probably know, like even today when we talk about like Native American characters and representations, kind of have you guys ever seen the Crying Indian commercial from like the 70s? You guys ever seen that he's crying because the Indian cries because there's pollution next to the road or whatever.
Yeah.
That's that idea. But who knows if this even went down this way, right? Like you guys said, John Smith could have just been making all this up.
Yeah. I'm almost willing to bet that he made it all up. Because it was just, I mean, it started out as almost believable, and then he had everything except for a robot. It was just, he went crazy.
What did you guys think of the way that he talked about himself in the third person? What did you guys think of that?
It was weird. Like, I actually had to look to make sure that he was the one actually writing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of just assumed that it was like he had a scribe or something like that writing it for him, but it's almost egotistical when you think about it.
Yeah.
I wonder how much different it would have been if, like, Pocahontas would have told her story instead of him telling it.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's a good. We'd like to know that view, that point of view.
Part 2.
Yeah. Where do we find that? we want to know about that.
That's going to be the sequel Disney movie.
Didn't they make like a part 2 or something? Pocahontas part 2? I think they did.
They did, but I haven't watched. I just assumed it was basically that, just remade newer. But I may watch it if I get time. I may watch them.
Well, that's actually
plus.
one of the first essay questions I'm going to give you guys is actually comparing and contrasting the Smith narrative with the Disney. So if you guys want to do something.
Okay, so like I'm going to have to watch the movie.
Yeah, we're going to have to watch the movie.
So an update on that. I have the prompt ready. I could probably spend like the last 15 minutes of class or so talking about that if you guys want. Just to give you an overview. So remember that in this class, there's technically 3 papers, but you only have to do 2 of them. So you can choose one to skip if you want. So if you're not feeling this one, then you have to do the next 2, right? But it's up to you. So let me go over this. I haven't posted this to Blackboard yet. I'm going to right after class because I worked on this right before class. The due date is next Friday, June the 11th. Okay, so you have plenty of time to work on this. Next Friday, June the 11th. I haven't updated that part yet. This is about 3 to 4 double-spaced pages. Okay, 3 to 4 double-spaced pages. So as far as like ways that you format the paper, follow standard MLA format. So I say that in a 200 class, but I can't ever assume you guys all know what that is. So actually, I think, let me look really quick. I think on our Blackboard page, I actually have a template for you.
You do.
I do. Yeah. Let me show you where on our page that is.
How do we use that? Do we just delete everything that you have written and just like backspace it or delete it all out and just start all over?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. And right here on the learning modules page, it's like the first thing you see, MLA formatted document. Use this to write your papers. And then to answer Bridget's question,
so all we'd have to do is just open up that document, delete everything out, write what we want, and just resave it and rename it.
right.
So we don't even have to check the margins or anything.
No, that's the beauty of this template. You don't have to.
Where's this been all my life?
I know, right?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised in all my classes, probably only 30% of my students use this and they still get it wrong. I'm like, I do it for you guys.
I've probably been one of those.
But here it is. Like when you pull this up off Blackboard, that's what it looks like. Basically, all you got to do is what I have here is like instructions on like how you can save this template and use it over and over and over. That's pretty much like what the instructions are here. And how to put your name in up here, like you double click, put your name in up here, type your name here, right? Put the date, have a title for your essay. Try to always have a title that, usually with these kinds of essays, a title that forecasts where you're going with your argument is usually a good way to do it. Don't just put title or whatever. That makes me die a little inside. Don't do that. All right, so basically all you got to do, it shows you here, like if you have a quote that goes over 3 lines, you're supposed to block quote it by indenting it by an inch. My advice with that is try to keep your quotes 3 lines or less. Like I don't want to see a bunch of block quotes in your paper. Maybe one. Right, but always only try to quote what you need. Basically, just delete this. All right, fill everything else in, and you're good to go. All right, that's basically how you use this template. And you should be able to use this for this class. And I don't know how many other English classes you guys might encounter after this. But you would use it for all your other English classes too. Okay, and it'll work. All right. I've always found it more effective just to do that instead of being like, here's how to do the margins. Here's how to, like, I've never found.
I think Word has a MLA template too.
It does. Google Docs does too.
Yeah, I've used that a couple of times in high school.
Right. So that's it for the formatting. Just do all that. You always use Times New Roman 12. Don't use any other font but Times New Roman 12. That's the standard. Usually when somebody like writes an Arial or something, I always like write a snarky comment like Times New Roman 12, always and forever. And that's usually what I write. Basically everything else that's on here I already said. So you don't need to do any research for this. Like you don't have to look up scholarly articles or anything like that. So this is wholly your opinion. So the same way that you guys are doing the discussion boards for Fridays, that's your main source of evidence. So you always want to make, no matter which question you pick here, you want to make sure that you ground it in the text. So the text is always your main source of evidence. Okay, so
you're going to post this prompt stuff on Blackboard, right?
Yeah, I'm going to post it right after class. So you'll
okay, because I'm on my phone, I can't see it.
Yeah. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Maybe that'll help. That'll help a little.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So, like I said, always make sure you bring in the text. Like, don't paraphrase the text. Bring in the text as much as you can. So, as far as writing this goes, assume that your reader knows the story. So you don't have to spend too much time summing up what happened in the plot or anything like that. Assume that your reader already knows the story. So you don't have to spend too much time worrying about summary or anything like that. So I'll give you 4 questions. You can pick one of the questions and do your paper on it. These, so here's the ones that I come up with. So this question involves reading literature through the perspective of nature and the environment. If you guys didn't look at that video from the first week, the video that I posted about like all the different ways to read literature, take a look at that because that gives you a nice foundation for like how we're approaching all this stuff. Like one way to approach stuff that we've read this week is through the lens of nature. So in this first week, we've encountered two visions of the American landscape. One is of an Eden, a new paradise. The other comes from an Old Testament idea of the wilderness, a landscape that tests the spiritual strength of Americans who live in it. This first post, pick a text that showcases the idea of the Edenic garden and a text that showcases the idea of the landscape as a wilderness. How does each text do so? To answer the question, be sure to provide evidence in the form of quotes in the text to anchor your argument. If you pick this question, I'm sure, like today we talked about Rollinson, like she's like a wilderness idea. Columbus has this like really Eden type of idea. There's some other examples too. So if you pick that question, just compare and contrast them almost, right? Just show how one exhibits this idea of the wilderness, or more, maybe one or two, and how one exhibits this idea of America as an Eden, a paradise. Right, so fairly straightforward question, that one. This is an idea that's going to keep coming up a lot in this class. That's why I ask it as this question. We're going to talk a lot about nature in this class. So Mary Rollinson's captivity narrative was one of the most famous captivity narratives about natives capturing Americans in an attempt to assimilate them into their culture. My question, what rhetorical purpose does Rollinson's narrative serve? What was she trying to accomplish by writing the narrative? Is the narrative about her spiritual struggle and strength? Or is it about painting Native Americans as savages to readers? Can we trust Rollinson as a historical source? Right, so you guys noticed, it's kind of steered the conversation that way a little bit today, right? When we talked about Rollinson, you guys all had your opinions on that. So a lot going on with that question. Right? What do you think she was trying to do? Was she trying to demonize Native Americans? Was she trying to show her spiritual struggle? Was it a little bit of both? What do you think the function of this text was? Why write this text? Right? What's she hoping to achieve by having people read this text? So think about the function of literature in this question. What was she even trying to achieve by writing this thing? And do you trust her? Right? Is she a trustworthy source, considering all the stuff she went through? Smith's account of the Pocahontas story is radically different than the one that has taken root in our popular culture, most notably in Disney's account of it. How are both accounts different? Why do you think American mythology has painted a different portrayal of Smith? Do this question, anchor your question in the text as well as the film. So if you do this question, make sure to give specific evidence from the text, and maybe talk about specific scenes from the film too. Okay, so that's a kind of a nice compare and contrast sort of question, where you got to talk about both to some extent. But if you talk about the film, like you want to tell me like where it is in the movie. So like, let's say you talk about a scene that's an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. Well, that would be how you would like, even in the text, you could just be like an hour and 5 minutes into the movie, this scene happens, right? And that's good enough as far as citing a movie. Okay, just make a mention in the sentence where in the movie the scene takes place. Like an hour and 5 minutes in, this scene starts. Here's everything that's going on in the scene. Here's the significance of the scene. So if you do that question, you not only anchor yourself in the text, but also the movie. Make mention of specific scenes. 4, trace the ways Edwards appeals to his readers' emotions in the famous sermon Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. How does he stir the emotions of his listeners? Why, in this case, do you think his sermon is literary? Provide examples from parts of his narrative to anchor your points. So, like, there's a good chance to like nitpick. Like, how is Edwards trying to appeal to your emotions in this? Do you think he was effective? Is the hellfire and brimstone version of Christianity effective in maybe like appealing to someone's and hopefully like converting people to become Christians? I mean, a lot of you guys were skeptical about that today. You thought ideas of God being more loving and accepting is more than is a way to bring people in better than hellfire and brimstone. Right? That seemed to be the general consensus today. So in general, you always want to make sure you anchor yourself with a thesis. So like in that opening paragraph, take a stance one way or the other. Right? So don't sit on the fence if you can help it. So you're like, from the get-go, like I think that Rollinson's captivity narrative was about painting Native Americans as savages, and maybe even a narrative meant to, I don't know, kill them all, right? You might as well kill them all. They're all savages, right? So take a stance early, and then you defend your stance the further you go. So remember, you don't summarize much because you always assume I know the story. So just automatically kind of like get to the point and anchor yourself in your arguments. You're making an argument here. That's the main thing. You're not summarizing, you're making an argument. So 3 to 4 pages, double spaced. Really, isn't that much room to make an argument necessarily? That's actually a pretty small amount of space to make an argument like this. So make sure you make the most of your 3 or 4 pages. Right? Like I said, don't throw in a bunch of big long quotes. And I usually see right through that, right? But make sure you bring in quotes, but bring in only what you need. Then analyze in your own voice. What do you think's happening here? You guys are doing great work on the discussion forums for the Friday. I read through them right before class. I was very pleased as a whole with the level of discussion that was going on there. So the same way you guys are bringing in the text there, you bring in the text here, right, to anchor yourself. Okay. So questions, comments, concerns about short paper 1? Anything that's unclear?
You said we're doing how many total, and we can pick 2 from this and then 2 from the next one. Is that right?
No, for this first longer paper, you only have to do one of these 4 questions.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the 4. So whichever one interests you the most, you can run with.
Gotcha.
Okay.
The readings for next week. I don't have my book yet. It is supposed to be here sometime next week. I've got volume B, but volume A still hasn't gotten here yet. Is there any way that you could send me a link?
Yeah, I can. All this stuff's available on the internet somewhere, so I can Google around and see if I can find a Ben Franklin and Jefferson and all that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That's no problem. And for Friday, you guys are we're going to spend a little bit more time with a Puritan writer Friday. You're going to read some poems from Anne Bradstreet. And also you're going to read Cotton Mather's account of the witch trials. And those are the 2 things that you guys will read for this Friday's shorter text discussion post. Okay, I'll get some questions up for that too right after class. I'm going to work on this class right after our Zoom and get everything up to speed, including uploading this prompt. Okay. So that is for Friday. As far as those Friday posts go, I'm usually pretty lenient on those. I mean, I say they're due Friday just to pace you. And like if you guys ever run into a bind, you turn them in on Saturday or something, I'm not going to take off for that. Okay, so just get them in before Monday, I would say. So take your time with those. Make sure you do. You don't have to have them in necessarily on a Friday. You can spend the weekend working on your Friday posts. That's fine with me. Okay. Since all you guys are doing Zoom, you don't have to worry about the Tuesday posts. You guys, I notice all of you are here, right? That's a little bit by design. I tried to make the discussion post sound so unappealing that you would join the Zoom. So my mission works.
I enjoyed it this evening. I really did.
I did too. You guys are a delight. The rest of the summer goes.
I had just got through telling my husband, I said, I have enjoyed this class. Now, we don't do the discussion on Blackboard, right, for today?
No, since you do Zoom, you don't have to do a Tuesday post.
I have to clarify things.
Yeah, so there's only one person in the class who has to do a discussion post, it looks like. So, so.
We have to respond.
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
So you guys, if you keep coming to the Zooms, all you got to do is the Friday discussions.
Okay.
And you guys are doing great on those. I was very pleased with the first batch. Okay, so like I said, Friday is Bradstreet and Mather. So you only have. I'll post a bunch of questions, but for the Friday, you only got to pick one to respond to. Okay. So respond to your students, like engage with each other, like you guys were doing this week. I was happy with even the responses. For the responses, as long as you guys do something besides just agree with each other, I'm happy. Right? You guys know in these online classes, that's often how it works. Everybody always agrees with each other. But I got news for you. Nobody agrees with each other on anything in America, right? So I'm not expecting complete agreement all the time. You guys,
my English 101 and 102, nobody agreed with each other. It was constant back and forth.
Oh yeah.
In a way, it was horrible, but
well, I'm glad to hear that. For the most part of my classes, everybody always agrees with each other. You're like, yeah, I agree that the sky is blue in this.
Well, I took it in high school. I took both of them in high school, so I guess that had a big part of it. But
did you take it through the college or dual credit?
It was dual credit through Marshall, yeah. Really? My aunt actually taught the class, so I figured I had to take it.
So you guys feeling pretty good about everything?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very good. Like I said, I'm going to get those discussion questions for Friday up. And I'm also going to work on the module for next week, which is the Enlightenment period, the Revolution period. So for next week, for next Tuesday, there's a couple of big readings. Part 1 and 2 of Franklin, the Jefferson reading, and the Crevecoeur reading. So you have 3 readings for next time. Franklin takes a little while, so Franklin's the one you'll have to spend the most time with. But Franklin's a delight to read. The guy's very humorous, and he's a delight to read. So even though that one's a little longer, you guys won't have trouble with him. It's a fun one. All right, so we'll see you guys next Tuesday then.
All right, good night.
Enjoy your evening.
Bye.